with the girls who want to be rich. Like, I want to wake up and do anything I want. I want to have my own business. I want to have my own YouTube. I want to have my own everything. I don't want to go to work. And it might sound so lazy.
You've probably heard it. Younger generations are lazy and spend all their time on TikTok and Instagram. But while it's surely true that distractions nowadays are more than ever before, with TikTok counting over 1.7 billion users and teens spending almost 2 hours every day on the platform, I went and looked at real data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Census Bureau, and also sources for UK and Europe, to actually find out if the problem with young generations having no money is more about wokeness, laziness and TikTok dances, or we do live now in a time where living is truly financially harder than before. So I came out with 3 reasons why life is financially harder for new generations. 1 is their fault and 2 aren't. The interesting thing is that young generations earn on average almost double as much as baby boomers back in the 70s, when adjusted for inflation. So how is it that now we struggle to pay off our student loans, we barely make the ends meet, although we don't have kids until we're 40, and we struggle to rent a 20 square foot apartment while our parents got married and bought their first house at, what, 21?
Why would they be buying houses?
Well, that's because I'm rich.
If we take a look at the minimum wage over time, since the 70s, it went from around $2 to $7.5 today. But inflation-adjusted wage tells a different story. Taking into consideration that buying power in 1970, it was like our parents were actually earning a minimum wage of $12.5 in today's money, compared to the $7.5 we have today. Now, compare the average annual income that a person has today, adjusted for inflation, with the average consumer price index called CPI, which is a measure of inflation for consumers, and you get to the same conclusion. The typical American income in 1970 in today's dollars was $24,600 per year, with an average consumer price index of 38.8. Fast forward to 2020, inflation-adjusted wages increased by 80% to $44,200, but the CPI increased by over 500%, from 38.8 to 258.80. This means that Gen Z dollars today have 86% less purchasing power than those of baby boomers when they were in their 20s. To put it in practical numbers, how much does a single person have to work to sustain a family compared to the past? For this, we can use the so-called cost of thriving index that measures how many weeks of work a typical earner would need to support a family of 4 for a year on the 5 essential needs, which are food, housing, healthcare, transportation, and education. In 1985, a single earner needed 40 weeks of work to cover all their expenses for a single year, while today he needs 62 weeks, well over the 52 weeks a year that he has. So let's start with probably the biggest dream of all generations, and by far, the biggest expense of all, which is housing. Except for Grant Cardone, Robert Kiyosaki, and other people that own like 400 homes or more, many of us dream of owning at least a single, beautiful house. It's no news that the idea of owning a place that you can call home is one of the biggest dreams, and somehow it seems further and further to reach for most people. In the last 50 years, the cost of homes has strongly outpaced inflation. Median home prices in the US have gone from $24,800 in 1970 to over $370,000 in 2022, which of course in absolute terms doesn't really tell us much. But if you consider inflation, we see that basically buying a house now is almost double as expensive as it was for a family in 1970. Millennials and GenZers can't afford to buy a house, and they are forced to stay in rentals that are becoming just as costly, if not costlier, than a mortgage. The median rent adjusted for inflation is up 62% from 1970, and spending so much money on rent makes it difficult even to save money for a home. And even though housing prices dropped between 2005 and 2010 during the Great Recession, the median rent didn't really decrease. So renting is eating out of savings, and the income is in most cases not enough to even qualify for a mortgage on an average home. And the crazy thing is that this is happening worldwide. Let's take the US as the first example. If you could use 100% of your income towards buying a house, how many years would you actually need to pay it off completely? This is actually a really interesting ratio that is called home price to income ratio, and it's a good benchmark to see how the housing market is developing compared to the average income. In 1970, the home price to income ratio was around 3.5 to 4, meaning the average person would have needed 3.5 to 4 years worth of income to pay off their house, if they could use 100% of it to pay the house. But check this out. The ratio grew steadily since then, and notice that right now in 2023, we are sitting at a value that is even higher than during the housing bubble in 2008. With a ratio of 7.56% at the end of 2023, an average house costs almost 8 times the average American income. The European neighbors don't have it better though. Sitting at 8.39 at the end of 2023, houses in the UK are even costlier than in US. Obviously, these are average country values, and if you look at the cities, we're gonna find even worse results. London currently has a price-to-income ratio of 16.88. Germany goes from 8.3 for a city like Frankfurt to 13.43 for Munich. And Milan, in my beautiful home country, Italy, currently has the highest price in Europe with a 20.15 price-to-income ratio. And you know, this is actually what makes me mad the most when I hear people that got rich with real estate in the 80s or in the 90s, and they say that real estate is the best investment of all time. Sure, real estate is still one of the best investment vehicles to make money, but taking mortgages and paying them off through renting out the place is not as easy as it was before. The gap between the cost of buying a house and renting out a house or apartment in the US has grown to the largest on record, even surpassing that seen during the housing bubble in 2008. And as the real estate firm CBRE found with a study across dozens of US cities, the home buying premium is even bigger for cities. The most expensive region for home buyers is Southern California, where the home buying premium for Orange County and Los Angeles is more than 200% more expensive than renting, while the cheaper are Denver and Sacramento, with a cost for home buying which still is 140% higher than renting. Moving to Europe, home prices almost doubled from 2013 to today, and rents grew slowly with a nice, almost flat line. So the one and only cash flow that you get from real estate investing, which is renting out, is shrinking compared to an investment you need to put on the table to buy that asset in the first place. Now, there is a rule in real estate investing which is called the 1% rule, which basically says that when you assess the price of a real estate investment, you should consider it a good investment if you can get 1% of the buying price every month as rent. For example, if a rental property is purchased for $200,000, the monthly rental income should be at least $2,000. Well, if you live in the south of Germany, for example, like in Stuttgart or Munich, in order to rent out an apartment for 1,000 euros or 1,500 euros, you need to spend on average between 300,000 euros and 400,000 euros, making a 1% rule more like a 0.3% rule. Another huge reason why boomers were able to afford houses and had a lower cost of living was the lower cost of education, and probably the overall lower student loan debt balances that they experienced. The days where you could land a good job with just a high school diploma or no qualification at all are over. Nowadays, a college degree is a minimum requirement to even step foot into a company's door. And this doesn't even guarantee you a good salary. I hate working! If the raise in home prices wasn't high enough, the price for 1 year of tuition of a public 4-year college has gone up 310% from $2,800 on average in the 1970s to $11,400 in 2021, when adjusted for inflation. It's not a case that student loans have contributed to one of the biggest debt crises in the US, with over $1.7 trillion owed by former students in 2022. And this is only considering tuition, because the total annual cost per year to attend a public 4-year in-state institution would be around $26,000. So, if we leave inflation aside and we just consider absolute values, in 1970 the minimum wage was $2 and the average year of tuition costs was $400 per year. That means that the ratio between tuition and minimum wage was 200. Since in 2021 we had around $10,600 tuition cost per year, considering the 200 ratio, the minimum wage should be now $53. But it's $7.5 in the US. But is this stopping people from graduating? Obviously no, since the pressure to get a college degree to compete in the job market is higher than ever, and universities know it very, very well. So a high willingness to pay means that they will continue to freely raise their prices. In fact, the graduation rate has increased by 254% since 1970, growing from 10.7% to 37.9% in 2021. So a college degree has become both less valuable and more expensive, because the truth is, if more people are highly educated, their education is less valuable, or in other terms, the competition is going to be higher. So let me do the math. Gen Z college students go into debt to pay for college, usually over $100,000, only to get to a saturated job market offering rates that fall short of the cost of goods and housing. Wow, this doesn't look like a really good deal. There is another factor though that is tearing down Gen Z and Millennials' wealth, and in my opinion is one of the biggest, worst traps that holds us back from accumulating wealth. By the way, I believe that young generations here are guilty of it. And that's the thing that nobody wants to admit having, that baby boomers used to contract in order to buy a house, and the new generation usually get to buy a new car, sometimes a new phone or a new television. I'm talking about Debt, which has actually helped the US see the biggest economic growth in the world from the 70s to today, but at the same time the biggest debt growth from around $3 trillion in 1970 to $33 trillion today. But the biggest problem here is consumers' debt, the one we get. Baby boomers were only getting into debt for a house or to start a business, but now we are making more and more money circulate in our economy thanks to debt, which contributes to inflation. So by basically using more money than what we actually have, we are cheating society into having more money than we actually have. So businesses offering us products and services raise prices because the demand is actually higher than a real sustainable one. So as opposed to a mortgage, one of the biggest debts now is credit card debt. The average American has nearly $6,000 worth of credit card debts, and this number is only getting larger, with a total credit card debt in America of $1.08 trillion this year, according to the New York Federal Reserve. To make this situation worse, average credit card interest rates sit at a record high of 24.59%, as reported by LendingTree. So we are seeing a huge amount of consumer debt being taken on overall, and sometimes it's for futile stuff like a brand new iPhone or a big television, and sometimes, unfortunately, for some families, it's really to make ends meet. So if you're watching right now and you recognize how the situation is getting worse and worse, and want to finally be able to buy a house or free yourself of debt, there are some steps that you can take. So let me give you some general rules. If you're trying to rent or buy a home, a popular standard is a so-called 30% rule, where you spend a maximum of 30% of your income before taxes on your rent or mortgage payment. If you live in big cities like New York, probably spending only 30% is nearly impossible. So obviously you need to adjust to the cost of living, but keep in mind that whatever goes towards housing is gonna leave you with less margin for all other necessities. For financing a car, there's a really nice rule called the 23-8 rule, which I'm not sure if it's an old rule or it was invented by the guys at the Money Guy show. But in any case, I suggest you to follow these guys on YouTube because they're really great when it comes to personal finance. The rule suggests a down payment of at least 20%, financing for no more than 3 years, and ensuring that monthly payments do not exceed 8% of your monthly gross income. All of this is basically made with the goal of preventing your eyes from becoming bigger than your wallet and taking on a payment that looks too good to be true because you're diluting it over many years. Now, if you're able to lower your overall spending, you should start investing regularly, and you should always try to take advantage of any tax advantage account like a 401k or a Roth IRA. I talk about these a lot in my channel, so if you're interested in investing in finance, consider subscribing to the channel and take a look at some videos of mine. The Roth IRA is an individual retirement account with which you can freely decide where you want to invest, and the investment comes from after-tax money but grows tax-free, and you can withdraw the money tax-free after 59 years and a half of age. As of this year, 2024, you can contribute $7,000 a year if you're under 50 or $8,000 a year if you're 50 or older. In case you're a high-income earner, it might make sense to also use a standard deductible IRA because the investment is taxed, but you contribute with before-tax money. So you're gonna actually take more advantage of the compound interest. Switching jobs to earn a higher salary is also an option to raise your savings rate, since you're more likely to get a higher raise than by simply staying in your company. Alright guys, let me know what you think in a comment. Do you think that the younger generations are actually guilty of having less money? Is it more because they are spending more for futile stuff, or is it because of the increasing cost of living? I'm gonna drop another interesting video of this kind here if you're interested, and apart from this, thank you for watching, I wish you a great evening, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!